This video is about a UTG full-size AO mil-dot scope 1x24 through 16x40 that can be found on Amazon for a very reasonable price at $70.45. At the time of making this video, that price was is a pretty good deal for what you get for this scope. So we have 4 to 16 magnification, a 1-inch tube diameter, a 40mm objective diameter, 23 to 5.8 field of view at 100 yards, 3.9 to 3.5 inch eye relief, 10 to 2.5mm exit pupil, 0.25 inch click value at 100 yards, a 365mm length, 20.1 ounce weight, and 5 yards to infinity parallax setting. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the manual here. This is the UTG optics using bi-leapers. So I'm going to quickly run through the manual, and you can press the pause button whenever you feel like it. This video should be at 1080p, so hopefully you guys are able to read what's in this manual here, okay? So for what I ordered, it actually came with these scope mounts here. And just a little added suggestion, when you tighten these screws here, make sure that you use an Allen wrench or some sort to give it a little bit of an extra snug fit, because after a while it will get loose as you fire your firearm. Okay. This is your battery and your mil-dot instructions. This here is your adjustments for your scope in meters. Alright, before we move forward, I'm just going to see to check this firearm. Okay, as you can see, no magazine. Good to go. This is my wife's rifle with the UTG scope, mil-dot scope, sitting on a Archangel deluxe target stock made by ProMag. And the only things that I'm going to mention right now before I get into the basic overview, now this is not going to be a review because you know, I'm not a professional on scopes, but a brief overview in case you're looking at purchasing a scope like this. The only thing that I really didn't like about this scope is that it's quite large. But again, for the price, $70, not a big deal. In addition to its actual size, its actual weight at 20 ounces is a pretty heavy scope. Alright, so how long is this in relative to inches? Well, let's get a tape measure here. I measure from the front to the rear is approximately 15 inches. Okay, so that's how long it is. Now let's just see how thick it may be in case you want to drop this in a rifle case. And from windage to illumination, we have about 2 3/4. So the total length, to be safe, the width would be 3 inches. Okay, so the height would be measured the same way, except would be this way, right? So this would be still 2 1/4. So the height would actually be about approximately 2 1/4 inches long, if that's something that you'd be interested in knowing. This scope, in my opinion, is a very good price scope. It's not one of those high quality scopes that you would find that's like $2,500. I mean, at $70, this scope is a very good deal, in my opinion. If you run this scope on a Ruger 1022 or a pellet gun or some sort of air gun, this scope will run just fine. The one thing I like about this system is that, from what I read, it is a sealed system. How good of a seal it is the question, but so far it has not given me any issues. Where I live is in a very moist area where things will mold pretty quickly, things will rust pretty quickly, and so far I've had this scope for about 3 months and it has not had any issues internally. Okay, so it is a very, very clear optic. I can see very clear. 100 meters is not a problem at all. This turn of a knob will illuminate your crosshair. That's how you enable it for this model scope here. UTG sells other model scopes very similar with illuminated crosshairs, but this one is built this way. Up here you have your zero reset Allen screw. You have your elevation settings. And down here you have a locking mechanism. You just spin this way or back to lock. and that will lock in your 0 as you turn it. Okay. On this side, you obviously have your windage. Okay. Of course, the same locking mechanism, right? You can lock it in place to hold 0, right? And over here, as you just heard, we have these lens caps, plastic lens caps that do slide off. All right. And on this side is the same thing. You have this lens cover, which is pretty plastic. I mean, it's pretty weak. I mean, as far as the whole scope goes, the covers are probably the weakest, but it hasn't broken on me yet, and I've had this scope for about 3 months. Okay. Now, it does come with these scope mounts, which is pretty good, and it mounted for this Ruger. It mounts right on the stock Picatinny rail that came with this Ruger 1022. One thing I wanted to mention about these mounts here is that if you hand tighten, like the instructions would say, it will loosen after a few fires. Okay, so there is a little hole on top here that you can fit an Allen wrench in, and then make it an additional snugness to make sure that it won't get loose. These here so far have not gotten loose. Here is where your battery compartment is. When you turn this dial, it enables the illumination of your crosshair. What you want to do is hold that dial in place and then unscrew the cap for your battery. This was already loose, which is why I don't have, because I only have one hand. The battery that it takes is standard CRC 2032 3-volt lithium battery. Okay, it does come with 2 batteries, so one as a spare, which is always a cool thing. And you just spin the cap back on, and then you're good to go. At the rear of the scope, we have your magnification, and then of course